This video is my reaction to the Detroit Lions' 44-22 win over the Commanders on Sunday afternoon. The Lions go into D.C., or Maryland to be more specific. They scored on their first 8 drives offensively, rolled up 546 yards of offense. They clearly featured Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams against the Commanders team that's rolling. That's one of the worst defenses in the league, at least in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Of course, they've gone through, a number of injuries. Jared Goff was very efficient. I think he finished 25 of 33 passing. Gibbs and Williams, they combined for 4 touchdowns and 292 yards of offense together, pushing the Lions to 6-3, heading into next week's road bout against the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, the offense bounced back from an extremely disappointing home loss to the Minnesota Vikings last week. Detroit scored, like I said, on their opening 8 drives, over 500 yards of offense while Dan Campbell called the plays. That element that I think is probably already been discussed a ton on social media, and rightfully so. At the time that I was watching the game live, and I think it was Jonathan Vilma was talking about it, it was like, okay, is he actually calling plays? Is he just conversing or collaborating with Morton on it? And I think it was like mid-second quarter, maybe the second time that Vilma mentioned it. I noticed that Campbell had his glasses on. And the timing of the broadcast and the discussion, or when, a coach is talking clearly into a mic, you never know if it's actually lining up. Like, are you seeing a live feed, or are you seeing something from 5 to 7 seconds ago? In any case, I have to give Vilma credit. He talked about it often. I think he brought it up 4 times. To me, once I saw Campbell with his reading glasses on, basically when Detroit had the ball, it appeared as if he had those glasses on, and especially during the challenge of the 4th down completion to Deebo Samuel, the one that Campbell lost, I think he challenged 2 plays today. You could see that his glasses were off. So to me, it seemed heavily involved even before during the press conference where he confirms that he was calling the plays today. I'll have more to say about it a little bit later, but I think it's a good decision. Just off the cuff, my initial reaction to it when I saw it in the middle of the second quarter, and to me, for Vilma to mention it so many times, I suspect that he was probably getting some intel or information fed into his ear, meaning Vilma being given some info by the producers who were looking through the cameras and then relaying information to him. We all know that Morton was having issues with certain situations or elements of the game, number one. Number two, Campbell understands the system, right? He can help. So from that standpoint, I think it's a good move. I do not suspect that it's a step towards replacing John Morton. I'm really not willing to address that, nor do I anticipate anything like it. I support the move. I think Campbell knows what he's doing. I think he's capable of getting this accomplished and taking more control. It's his football team. His name is going to have a record attached to it just to the right. And so from that standpoint, if I've interpreted it correctly, I support the decision, and I think it'll be the best thing moving forward. In any case, let's talk about some of the stats that were overwhelmingly in Detroit's favor. Gibbs finished with, I think, 143 yards on the ground, the 2 touchdowns, one of which was, or the second of which was a 44-yard scamper in the fourth quarter. That one really put it away. He had 18 touches for 173 yards overall. The 3 touchdowns, the one receiving touchdown was in the first quarter. That one capped the opening possession for Detroit. 10 plays, 78 yards. A superb performance on that drive. But throughout the game from the offensive line, the Lions finished, I believe, 226 rushing yards. Montgomery got some touches late, which is interesting to me. Normally, those types of touches go to the 3rd running back or the 4th. But Gibbs was so heavily featured and effective, overwhelming at times, that Montgomery was kind of phased out, at least for today. Jameson Williams is perhaps the most exciting aspect of what we saw today, even though Gibbs's performance and his stats puts him in line for player of the week. Williams did have a drop later in the game when the backup quarterback came in. 7 targets officially, caught 6 of them, many of which were of the shorter variety. I've advocated for that here a little bit recently. I know many other Lions fans have as well. He did have the 1 touchdown on an underneath route right to left. I thought 3 times in this game he was open on those concepts. Goff hit him twice, one of which was the touchdown in the 3rd quarter. That one finished, I think it's a 5-play or maybe a 6-play drive for Detroit. Made it 32-10 just 3 minutes into the 3rd quarter. I thought Williams' impact was spectacular, running those routes underneath, just getting away from Commanders defenders who had no shot. giving him the ball on the move, to me, is best case scenario. Not that, I mean, he looked great last week, that late touchdown against the Vikings, right? Goff up the left sideline to pull him within one score. I'd like to see him get the ball about as often as he did today, if not a little bit more, underneath with the ability to run after the catch. In total, I think Detroit finishes with 530 yards of offense, 532. They average 8.3 yards per play. Goff is 25 of 33. 320 yards, the 3 touchdowns. He had one to St. Brown that's on a 3rd and 7 in the first quarter, excuse me. I think that one made it 14 to nothing. Detroit had run 19 plays to that point through their first 2 touchdown drives. It was pretty obvious early on. Washington was no match up front, especially. 19 plays in the first quarter for the Lions offense, 143 yards. So you're talking about over 7 yards per play. The touchdowns to Gibbs and St. Brown. Goff is 8 of 11 on that stretch. Really, you could see that Dan Quinn's group, it's a really poor defense at this point with multiple guys being out. But even before that, even dating back to last season when I saw them come to Baltimore and hang around long enough to only lose, I think, 27-20. Not a very talented defense, nor did they have exceptional cover guys, in my opinion. You saw it last week against the Seahawks. In my opinion, you really saw enough. They've given up 400 yards or more now in 4 consecutive weeks. 6 of their 10 games in 2025, the Commanders' defense has given up over 400 yards. I'm not saying that you should take this result with a grain of salt in terms of Campbell taking over the play-calling duties, but this was about as predictable as a game as you could have seen really in 2025. And I mean this, that Detroit was going to come in here and they were going to be able to get some things done against this defense. On the other side, I did think that Kelvin Shepard's group had a little bit of trouble matching up in 3 particular possessions, but in the end, Marcus Mariota only threw 22 times. It's a weird offense. They rely on the no huddle so much, virtually like handing the quarterback as much information as possible. They have, however, started to sub a little bit more in 2025. I saw it last week against Seattle, who's a base nickel defense, and then this week against Detroit, meaning they're getting in on that 12 and 13 personnel craze that so many teams have moved towards or shifted towards in 2025. Even the Rams. Sean McVay, typically 93% 11 personnel guy. He's been moved in certain games to like 40% 12 and 13 personnel groups. He used it against the Ravens early in the season for an easy touchdown on a run concept against our nickel defense. Getting back to what we saw today from the defense, I didn't think it was a completely dominant effort. They didn't force any turnovers, only generated 2 sacks. Brian Branch is involved with both of them. I think it's Lopez splits the second one with Branch. They did hold Washington to 288 yards overall. Part of that, I think, is, number one, is how long Detroit was able to possess the ball at times. I think they won the time of possession like 32-28 or a little bit above that. It is the 3rd game in a row where the Lions defense has allowed less than 300 total yards of offense. I think that's significant. If that trend continues, especially next week against the Eagles, you hold them to less than 300 yards of offense. I think you got a great chance to win that football game. Usually when you do that in the NFL, you're looking at, plus 70% win percentage, especially if you don't turn the football over. Now, Minnesota did score 27 points last week, but they got a short field 3 times. I think since the loss to the Chiefs, and I believe it was Dan Campbell, maybe it was Kelvin Shepard, admitted, maybe it was both of them, that they kind of went away from their philosophy, meaning with so many DBs being out against Mahomes and the Chiefs, they played a little bit more zone. Since then, yes, Detroit's given up 58 points in the 3 games, but they're holding teams down significantly in terms of overall yards allowed. In those 3 games against Commanders, Vikings, and Bucks, in reverse order, allowed 707 total yards, so an average of like 266 per game, 797, excuse me. In any case, on that side of the ball, Jack Campbell he led the team in tackles again with 9. I think that gives him over 80 for the season. He had a really physical and impressive one-on-one tackle on the 2-point conversion by Washington in the 4th quarter. I forget which running back it was, maybe McNichols. He also had a really nice track of Mariota on an option play. Branch had the 1.5 sacks along with 7 tackles overall. Gives him 3.5 sacks for the season. I believe that puts Detroit at 30 or 31 through 9 games. So really solid and impressive. And that you're talking about over 3 sacks per game. Hutchinson didn't get in on the act today for whatever reason. I'm not sure if the Commanders were, avoiding him or what. I do think it's worth mentioning that Goff was only hit 5 times today. He stood in the pocket, it seemed, just on first glance, a number of shorter routes being run, not just by Jamison Williams. In addition, on first impression, I kind of had to watch the game on a little bit of a delay because of when the Ravens game ended against the Vikings. A little bit more horizontal conflict created today, either by under center play action with a boot attached to it, or jet motion in one direction and the run action going opposite. I can't prove it, but that's just my impression the first time watching it through. I think I was about 30 to maybe 40 minutes behind everyone else because I was tracking the stats on ESPN, but also watching the gameplay on a second monitor. I do want to discuss the Campbell calling plays thing. On the surface, first of all, it did seem like he had the headset off in the fourth quarter and the glasses when the Lions had the ball and the backup quarterback was in. So part of me wonders if the NFL system is set up such that you can switch over from one guy to the next. That's not the understanding I had. I thought that it was 1-to-1, meaning only one person could communicate with the quarterback. I do not suspect that Morton and Campbell had that functionality at the same time. What I'm offering is, in the fourth quarter, when the Lions had the ball, the backups were in, Jameson Williams and a couple of others are on the field, as well as Dave Montgomery. I was a little surprised that Campbell had the headset and the glasses off. But in any case, I want to bring up a possibility or a perspective that I have a little bit of experience with, although even then I couldn't prove it. And that is that when Campbell intentionally in the press conference used the word collaborative or phrase collaborative effort. Shout out to the guys in the Lions Discord for keeping me updated there. I really kind of can't watch press conferences. I just was watching another game and then the Lions game, trying to record this video, and then make an attempt to watch the condensed version of the Seahawks game when I get the opportunity. Couple of things. The NFL headset system is 1-to-1, but it's one way. Quarterbacks cannot communicate back to the play caller, in this case, Dan Campbell. Functionality, both guys can communicate to each other, Morton and Campbell, as well as other players on the offensive staff. Other guys are involved. I'm familiar with that dynamic at the high school level and the youth level. There's going to be an offense side, a defense side. Some guys get headsets, some guys don't. Some guys only get earpieces because you don't want to hear them talk, because either they're not going to provide anything substantial to help, or they maybe talk too much and they are not able to control the volume of their voice when communication needs to occur. So certain people, I've experienced with this, are only given the audio, but they're not given the functionality to communicate back to you. So there's channels, right? And those channels flow from someone. Dan Campbell and every head coach will have someone responsible for the coordination of that behind him. Campbell may have a box on his hip to switch when he can, especially if he's involved with both the offense and the defense. Some guys are. In any case, I'm glad that he said collaborative effort, because yes, it will take some of his attention away from other aspects of the team. But Morton's been calling the plays so far this year, and so he's going to prepare Morton to the same level. I think that the offense having multiple flow points needs to be something that people focus on who may not have experience. Basically, what I mean is this. The communication, once it shuts off at 14 seconds between Campbell and Goff, will stay live between Campbell and everyone else. That is an opportunity for Morton, Campbell, whoever else is involved, to communicate to each other about that play and what it may set up in the future. In addition, I wonder what the workflow is, meaning we know that the communication shuts off at 14 seconds. I wonder if Campbell has the ability to stop it and not begin making his play call to Goff until a certain point in time, to give him an opportunity to communicate with Morton up top. And this is the point that I really like, or this is the dynamic that I really like. If Morton is up top, he's seeing the game from a different angle than Campbell is. And those guys, it can almost act like Campbell is in two places at once. I'm a fan of play callers being in the booth, but some guys operate better on the field, in my experience. It seemed to work tonight. Granted, the level of competition is obviously going to be a lot more difficult against the Eagles next week. Now, I will say this. Philadelphia has been acquiring a lot of talent to kind of plug holes, improve their defense, if you will. I was like, why? First of all, they are allowing 23 points per game. They only have 16 sacks. Now, they will not play their 9th football game until Monday night in Green Bay, right? But talent-wise, Philadelphia is in a different ballpark than the Commanders' defense, obviously. I still like the dynamic of Campbell calling plays, being heavily involved, and him and Morton collaborating. They went 5 of 10 on third downs today. Goff was really efficient. And as I said earlier, he wasn't sacked once. I think 5 quarterback hits. Washington came into the game with 22 sacks. Now, they didn't have one last week against Seattle, nor did they get one today against Detroit. Their defense has really been sparked out in both of those situations. Seattle jumped ahead, I think, 28-0 in the second quarter last week, if memory serves. Detroit was kind of close to matching that. It was 25-10 at the half. And I think at that point in time, just recognized, hey, look, absent turnovers, it's over. There's just very little opposition. The offensive line was great at getting horizontal movement for Gibbs to burst through. I thought I saw a lot of zone schemes today. If I was to make a summary judgment of what I believe occurred, the difference in play calling, shorter routes by the wide receivers and tight ends, Goff being able to get rid of the ball quicker. Offensive line, more horizontal action associated with the run plays and or the play action where Goff boots off of it. And then finally, more of a reliance on zone schemes. I could be really wrong, but I know that it worked in terms of protecting Goff. Whatever adaptations Campbell made, I think he knows the system. And the fact that he's been in this system, Campbell, along with Ben Johnson for so many years, it just makes sense that he'd be more heavily involved with the play calling now. Is it possible that Morton is calling certain plays? Absolutely. But in any case, I'll come back to that point here at the end. I did like the fact that Sewell, after getting injured, I think in the third quarter, with I guess an ankle, that he was able to come back out on the field and celebrate with his teammates. I believe it was the one that put him up 32-16 or 32-10. Excuse me, I could be wrong. In any case, around the time that the lead stretches to 35-16, I thought maybe they should get Sewell off the field and Goff as well. Try to get him out of there, keep him as healthy as possible going into Philadelphia next week. That'll be a really cool matchup for a lot of reasons. Detroit plays the Eagles next week, but also the Ravens play the Packers the next last week of the season. And, of course, Detroit gets a rematch with the Packers at home later on the season as well. So multiple chances for me to kind of observe teams, I guess, quote, scout, if you will, and give me some ideas about previews or projects to produce leading up to those games. Gibbs was obviously the star. All right, this is only his second 100-yard rushing game of the season. Last week he was totally held down, shut down, I guess I should say, by the Vikings. 28 yards of offense on 12 touches. Today, totally different production and story. 172 or 173 yards, 3 touchdowns. Does that coincide with Campbell calling plays? I don't know if it's causation, correlation, or what. Maybe there isn't neither of those two. But I think it'll certainly increase the attention that he gets from the Eagles next week and moving forward. It'll also give an uptick to his yards per carry. He was at 4.9 yards per carry coming in. And this will probably put him more in line with his previous output, his rookie season of 2023, and then last year. The underneath stuff to Williams, great. I love it. Even, I think, a couple of opportunities for Raymond to get balls thrown to him underneath, even though he wasn't targeted on one of them. I don't have any insight or perspective on, was Goff looking at St. Brown first on the overwhelming majority of his reads, which that has been the case so far in 2025. I think I've talked about it, and I believe others have as well, but you're more than welcome to give me some feedback on that idea. I think it's easy on Twitter, had posted a couple of plays that were kind of talking about Goff looking at St. Brown so much. If you guys watch a lot of my work, I started talking about it after the Chiefs game, and then even into the Bucks game. I think it was Servakier Dennis, the inside linebacker for the Bucks, constantly peeling off from inside out looking for St. Brown, and the Chiefs had done that at least 4 or 5 times in their win in Kansas City the week before, or maybe it was 2 weeks prior. In any case, I think the deeper pass routes at times this year have made receivers like not synced up with Goff's drop. Basically, the idea here would be Goff is ready to throw the football, and a receiver, maybe it's Williams, whoever, Raymond, Tesla, it hasn't made a cut yet. So they're at such a depth that they're unavailable. And Goff might get sacked or pressured or just move on to the next read, right? In my opinion, Campbell made the change there. I could be wrong, and other people may have a different perspective either in the comment section here or who give reaction videos sooner than this one was able to come out. I do think Detroit, it's interesting that Campbell is focused on the offense, and Detroit's only penalized 3 times tonight for 1 yard. Figure that out, right? I think when Dan Campbell refers to other aspects of the football team that he might get pulled away from, he could be talking about special teams. He could be talking about planned rotation of players. If he's going to be the guy delivering information to Goff up until 14 seconds left on the play clock, I think that's a good thing, because him and Ben Johnson are the guys that work together to create this offense and have it work out the way that it has in previous seasons. He got it done tonight. I would be really interested, and I have no way of knowing this. I'm not able to track offensive plays completely anymore. I think I did that for most of 2024 for the Ravens and Lions. At a certain point, just got away from me. I'd be interested to see the play call tendencies out of certain personnel groups or down in distances from weeks 1 through 9 versus what we saw today in week 10. The Eagles, this is a good thing. The Eagles have to try to figure out, okay, how much different is the offensive play calling going to look with Campbell here in charge, number one. And they'll also have one less day of rest to do it. I think this gives an opportunity for Campbell and Morton to demonstrate professionalism to their players and the media, right? I didn't like Morton's answers last week in one of the press conferences. I just didn't. It didn't sound like a guy taking enough responsibility to me. I believe in saying things up front publicly to take the responsibility, the blame for your players, to kind of free them of that. Basically get out in front of them and protect them, shield them, if you will, from some of that criticism. I don't know if that's related to Campbell taking over the play call, and I kind of don't care. I think this gives him an opportunity to do some interesting things. Now, here's what I mean. I am aware of a guy, far lower level of football, high school, option guy, who called plays to his sideline because he was on the sideline, and his offensive coordinator, who was up in the booth, called plays to his sideline. Now, this is when they were on the road. When they were at home, the head coach and his sideline will be on the same side of the field, if you will, as the offensive coordinator who was in the stands. So it was a different dynamic. And I didn't know this until meeting with a guy one offseason and talking to him. He was an option guy who typically, like, his first 4 or 5 plays, maybe even 6 or 8, would oftentimes include 2 or 3 different option plays, always to his sideline. So that was either to his right or to his left. Generally, he would take the football so that his offense was going to be near to his sideline, going to the right. So the quarterback's right shoulder would be facing him, if that makes sense, as he goes under center to snap the football. And I suspected, I knew from facing him twice before, that he liked to run option plays to his sideline in the first quarter. He was trying to determine your read. We knew that, so we tried to counter it. And through the course of a conversation, about 2 hours with a guy and just meeting with him about some option stuff, he revealed to me that he oftentimes on the road would call plays to his sideline, and the offensive coordinator would call them on the other hash. Of course, you know, in high school, the hashes are really, really wide, so it just kind of blew my mind and opened my thoughts up to, hey, maybe other people do things like that. Maybe certain guys call first and second down, and someone else calls third down. Maybe Campbell calls all the shotgun plays, and Morton calls on all the under center stuff. None of those things occurred today. Do I think they'll occur in the future? No, but it gives Campbell and Morton the opportunity to kind of hide within the data. Basically, Campbell will be the person relaying the actual verbal communication to Goff, but no one knows what information was provided to Campbell by Morton or anyone else, David Shaw included, to possibly funnel a different call in certain situations. Ball on the right hash, third downs, shotgun, under center, whatever. It's an interesting dynamic, something that I would have no knowledge of if I had not met with that super talented and old school coach years ago who kind of blew my mind when he said, that him and his offensive coordinator split play calling duties depending on which hash the ball was on. In any case, you guys didn't sign up for me to talk about high school stuff like that, but it was something that, for me, in my experience, gave me the freedom to think that sometimes people utilize more than one play caller to try to hide within the data and create, or hide patterns, I should say, within their tendencies. Perhaps in this case, with the Eagles coming up, Dan Campbell only calling plays 1 week, this week against the Commanders, that can end up helping the Detroit Lions out in their road game next week in Philadelphia. It was a fun game to watch, even though I had to watch it on a delay. So forgive me for the reaction video being out so late. I recognize that the Steelers and Chargers game is going on, but I wanted to get this one out early enough so I could get prepared for the film to be out early tomorrow and try to get some film studies done for you guys. Appreciate your time, man. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section. Number one. Number two, if you think other Lions fans would enjoy my thoughts on globally on the game today, but also on the Campbell and Morton play calling dynamic and how it could look different, moving forward, but also how they could manipulate teams. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy, my perspective on all of that, as well as some of the key plays and moments in this game, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.